I remember that day as if it were etched in my very soul. A day that was meant to be joyous and full of promise, yet turned into a nightmare that I still relive in quiet moments. I was 29 at the time, expecting our first child with Rick, my loving husband who was 30. And that day was supposed to be a celebration of family and new beginnings at my sister-in-law Anna's wedding. Instead, it became the stage for a drama. I never could have imagined the morning had begun with a tense excitement. I had been trying to balance the discomfort of my advanced pregnancy with the anticipation of seeing Anna in her radiant bridal beauty. I had always treasured my relationship with Anna and her sister Emily. Both of them had been my anchors when life got stormy. I cherished our sporadic phone calls and the heartfelt messages we exchanged, even though our busy lives often kept us apart. But there was one person who had always cast a long, dark shadow over every family gathering. Rachel, Rick's mother. From the day I met her, her controlling nature and constant need to dictate every little detail had set my nerves on edge. I had learned early on to keep my distance from her overbearing demands, and I thought that on a day meant for celebration, things might finally be different. I arrived at the venue feeling a mix of excitement and anxiety. The wedding was set in a charming little garden venue, the kind that seemed to promise an escape from the mundane into something magical. The air was filled with the scent of blooming roses and soft laughter. I had dressed in a modest, comfortable outfit that suited my condition. There was no room in my wardrobe for elaborate gowns when every step sent a reminder of my pregnancy. I just wanted to be there for Anna, to share in her happiness and support her as she embarked on a new chapter. As the ceremony began, I could feel a strange churn in my stomach, more than the usual pregnancy jitters. I tried to dismiss it as nerves, but soon a deep, unyielding pain took hold. I excused myself to the nearest restroom, hoping a moment alone might ease the discomfort. That's when everything went horribly wrong. As soon as I entered the small, tiled bathroom, I felt an inexplicable surge of panic. The pain intensified, and I knew in my heart that I was going into labor. I fumbled for my phone to call Rick, but before I could even dial a number, the bathroom door swung shut with a definitive click. I turned around in shock to see Rachel standing in the doorway, her expression a cold mask of determination. Without a word, she stepped forward and locked the door behind her. I pleaded, my voice shaking with fear and disbelief. "Please, let me out. I'm in pain. I need help." But Rachel's eyes narrowed, and she replied in a clipped tone that made my heart sink. "We can't have you stealing the spotlight now, can we? Not today." Her words were like ice, cutting through the fog of pain and confusion that clouded my mind. I pounded on the door, screaming for help, but the sound of my desperate cries was swallowed by the hum of the wedding celebration happening just outside. In those moments, I felt utterly isolated and betrayed, not only by the woman who was supposed to be part of our family, but by the very institution of family that I had held dear. The minutes dragged on like hours as I curled up on the cold bathroom floor, sweat mingling with tears. The pain was unbearable, and every contraction felt like it might be the last thing I ever experienced. I was alone, locked away from the world, with no phone, no help, and no Rick by my side. I remember thinking with a desperate clarity, I might die here, and my baby might die with me. Somehow, after what felt like an eternity, the bathroom door creaked open. I was disoriented and weak, barely able to stand, when a kind voice broke through the haze of agony. It was Rachel again, but this time there was a flicker of concern, or so it seemed. "Get up," she ordered sharply, helping me to my feet with a force that left me trembling. I handed her my phone, begging her to call Rick immediately, explaining in halting words that I was in labor and needed to get to a hospital. Instead of dialing Rick, however, she smirked and said, "Rick will be here in a bit. Don't worry about it. We wouldn't want to cause a scene at Anna's wedding, now, would we?" My heart sank further as I realized the cold calculation behind her actions. I pounded on the door once more, crying out until my voice was raw. But the sound of wedding music and murmurs from the gathering outside made it seem as if my suffering was invisible, a small inconvenience in someone else's perfect day. In that bleak, desperate moment, I felt the full force of abandonment and isolation. I was trapped in labor, with no one to save me, and the woman who should have been a guardian instead became my warden. Eventually, through some twist of fate, the door was flung open by a staff member who had noticed the commotion. They rushed me out of that confining space and hustled me toward the waiting car. I can still recall the frantic, jumbled voices as they tried to explain the situation to Rick over the phone, his voice trembling with panic and anger. By the time we reached the hospital, I was on the verge of collapse. My body battered by pain, my spirit nearly broken by the cruelty of the moment. Hours later, I awoke in a sterile hospital room, the dim overhead light casting long shadows on the white walls. Rick was there, his eyes red from crying, holding my hand, as if afraid to let go. I could see the exhaustion etched on his face, the sorrow mingled with relief that I was still alive. The nurse's gentle murmur and the steady beep of machines were the only sounds that filled the room as I drifted in and out of a haze of pain and gratitude. It was then that Rachel, with an expression that bordered on desperation, came to my bedside. Her eyes were wide and uncertain, and she whispered, "Please, don't file charges. Please." The plea was so weak, so out of character, that it only deepened the wound inside me. In that moment, I realized that Rachel had always been a master manipulator, a woman who would go to extreme lengths to control every situation, even if it meant endangering lives. I felt a surge of anger, a burning resolve to protect my daughter May, who I learned was born just 2 weeks prior. Even as the joy of May's arrival filled our hearts with hope, the traumatic memory of that day was a scar that would never fully fade. In the days that followed, the hospital room became both a sanctuary and a prison. I grappled with the overwhelming mix of emotions, a cocktail of relief, sorrow, and an ever-present fear that this betrayal had irrevocably altered the course of my life. Rick, ever steadfast, comforted me in whispered reassurances and gentle touches, yet I could see the lingering shadow of Rachel's manipulation in his eyes. He was torn between his love for me and the deep-seated loyalty he felt toward his mother, a loyalty that I had once feared would tear us apart. I spent countless hours in quiet contemplation, replaying every moment in my mind. The sound of my own screams echoing off tiled walls, Rachel's cold, calculated voice, and the crushing weight of being abandoned at a time when I was most vulnerable. I wrote down every detail in a journal, not only as a means to cope, but to ensure that the truth would not be forgotten. Those pages became my silent testimony, a record of pain and survival that I hoped would one day lead to justice. I vowed then that I would never allow someone like Rachel to endanger my family again. Rick's promise to file charges, his resolute declaration that his mother was now dead to him, was a small balm to my wounded heart. Yet even as legal proceedings began, I knew that no courtroom ruling could ever undo the trauma of that day. My sister-in-law Anna had been caught in her own tumult of emotions. When I had explained the predicament, the frantic call for help, the humiliating confinement in the bathroom, the terror that I might lose both my life and my unborn child, Anna had been heartbroken. She had always been the one to put family first, and though she was furious at Rachel's blatant disregard for our safety, she also wrestled with her own sense of duty toward the wedding and her future with her fiancé Jonah. I remember Anna's voice, soft yet firm, as she consoled me in the hospital corridor. "I know you did everything you could. Your safety and May's safety is what matters most. We will get through this, I promise." Her words, though laced with regret for the disruption of her big day, gave me a flicker of hope amidst the despair. Emily, who had taken on the role of maid of honor after I had to step back from my bridal duties, was another pillar of strength. Even though she lived in a different city, and our interactions were often limited to texts and hurried phone calls, her presence that day had been like a warm blanket. She had flown in at the last minute, her eyes filled with concern as she held me close, whispering, "You are so strong, and we are here for you, always." Her support was unwavering, a reminder that true family bonds could withstand even the darkest of betrayals. As I lay in that hospital bed, recovering slowly from the ordeal, I began to see the threads of my shattered life weaving themselves into a tapestry of resilience. Rachel's actions had exposed a bitter truth about the dynamics of our family, a truth that was painful to acknowledge but necessary to confront. She had always been a force of chaos, her every action driven by a desperate need for control and attention. In her eyes, every misfortune was an opportunity to manipulate the narrative, to maintain her dominance even at the cost of someone else's well-being. Rick and I made a silent pact then, a promise that our daughter May would grow up in a home where love and safety reigned supreme, untouched by the toxicity that had once threatened to destroy us. We decided that Rachel would never see May again, not until she sought genuine help for the issues that plagued her soul. Rick, for he had always loved his mother despite everything, but love alone could not justify endangering the ones we held dear. The fallout from that day rippled through our family like a shockwave. Anna, whose wedding had been marred by whispers and cold stares, found herself at the center of a media frenzy as the story of a mother-in-law locking a woman in a bathroom went viral online. While many expressed sympathy for me, others criticized the very idea of a pregnant woman disrupting such an important day. I knew that the truth was complicated, that even in the midst of betrayal, there were shades of gray in every relationship. But I refused to be painted as the villain in someone else's narrative. In the quiet aftermath, as Rick and I settled into our new roles as parents and survivors, I began to find solace in small moments of peace. I would cradle May in my arms, marveling at the tiny fingers and the soft cooing that reminded me that life, in all its fragile beauty, was worth fighting for. I realized that the trauma I had endured was not something that could be erased overnight, but rather a scar that would slowly, imperceptibly, transform into a symbol of my strength. Even now, as I reflect on that harrowing day, my heart aches for the innocence lost and the bonds broken. Rachel's descent into bitterness and her eventual legal isolation serve as a cautionary tale, a stark reminder that the pursuit of control and the desire for attention can lead to irreparable damage. I have learned that true family is not defined by blood or obligation, but by the love, respect, and care we show one another in moments of vulnerability. My journey toward healing is far from over. There are nights when the memories of that locked bathroom and the terror I felt in those agonizing minutes come rushing back, making me doubt whether I will ever be truly free from the shadow of that day. Yet, I choose to see each tear as a testament to the love I have for my daughter, and each painful memory as a stepping stone toward a future where I am no longer defined by fear. I have turned my pain into a quiet rebellion, a promise that I will never allow anyone to diminish my worth or the safety of those I love. I stand here today, with May softly sleeping in my arms, still feeling the echoes of that fateful day. A day when fear and pain threatened to steal my life and my daughter's future. Even as I continue to heal, the scars of being locked in that cold, unyielding bathroom remain a silent reminder of a betrayal I never saw coming. I have learned that family should be built on trust and care, not on manipulation and control. My heart, though wounded, has grown stronger with every tear shed and every moment of courage summoned in the darkness. Meanwhile, Rachel, once the iron-fisted guardian of the family's facade, now finds herself isolated in a spiral of regret and legal consequences, her actions leaving a trail of shattered trust that she can never repair. While she endures the consequences of her cruelty, I have chosen to let go of the bitterness, embracing the truth that our lives are meant for healing, not for endless revenge. Yet, I cannot help but wonder if this is truly the end of her reign of terror, or if more challenges lie ahead in our journey toward peace. As I move forward, I carry with me the hard-won lesson that true strength comes from confronting our deepest wounds and turning them into the foundation of a better future, for ourselves and for those we love. May's gentle coos remind me that life, fragile and precious, demands we protect and cherish every moment. I invite you to reflect on your own experiences of pain and resilience. Have you ever faced a betrayal that forced you to redefine what family means? Share your stories, your lessons learned, and let's build a conversation that turns our shared struggles into hope and strength. What does healing look like for you, and how do you reclaim your power in the face of adversity? Your voices matter, and together we can transform our scars into a tapestry of courage and renewal.